Somebody's got a phone call. Not you.
It's the president.
Well, that's funny. Well, we welcome you from Withers Ravenel, and we are delighted that you're here to do your presentation. We will go ahead. Would you like to start by introducing yourselves, perhaps, or?
We can. I'll start. My name is Cameron Patterson. I'm the Director of Public Sector Services for the company.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Gary Warner. I'm a landscape architect and planner with the Ravenel.
All right.
I'm Jay Johnston. I'm out of the Asheville office. I'm the senior project manager of the company.
All right.
I'm Michael Wicker. I'm a senior technical consultant with Ravenel.
Thank you.
Seth Robertson, as some of you know me, Director of Funding and Asset Management.
Always a good person to know. Well, we are ready whenever you are. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm Freddie Harold. I'm business development and population guy. Happy to be here.
Well, we're delighted to have you. So please begin whenever you're ready with your presentation. We're missing one UAB member, but he will be in momentarily.
Okay, so, start. Okay, well, thank you for inviting us to be here today. Again, my name is Cameron Patterson. I'm the Director of Public Sector Services at Withers Ravenel. Mainly here today to tell you guys how important this on-call compact is to us. We're very excited to present our qualifications for the on-call special services. So I'm talking.
If you want to
Yeah,
get,
if you wanna
Cameron,
get up
get
the
behind
podium.
the podium right there, you'll be recorded and
Okay.
be perfect.
All right. Do I start over or?
No.
No, we heard
you're
you.
good.
Okay, so where did I leave off? So we have a lot of ground to cover in our presentation today, but feel free to interrupt us at any time with any questions or comments. We'd like this to be a presentation that you guys participate in, if you'd like. Before
Michelle.
nope.
Oh, there
Here we
it
go.
goes. Must be a loose connection.
Can we turn it back?
There we go.
We're good? All right. So, before I introduce the project team, I wanted to emphasize a few things about our company. Withers Ravenel has been in business for over 36 years, serving public and private sector clients across the state of North Carolina. We're a full-service consulting engineering firm. We have the in-house capabilities to take your projects from planning all the way through implementation. With over 250 employees, we're the largest firm in the state that's North Carolina-based and North Carolina-focused. So through our local Asheville office and our offices across the state, we have the ability to be as responsive as you possibly need us to be. We have the capacity to handle compressed schedules, and we have the ability to provide the financial and funding services that I know will be very important to you guys. And as you know, part of our team is already working with you guys on the financial services side. Again, with me today, Jay Johnston, Gary Warner, Michael Wicker, Seth Robertson, and Freddie Harold. Jay will serve as your project manager particularly for the all water and wastewater related projects, including your wastewater treatment plant and your sewer line collection system. Gary Warner will be the he's the landscape architect and head planner with our group. He'll be involved in all projects that we consider placemaking. We'll talk about that later. Michael Wicker is, he said, senior technical consultant, but he'll be senior project engineer for your wastewater treatment plant project. And as you guys know, Seth Robertson has worked with you guys on financial work already. You probably also know him from working with the state of North Carolina. He'll be the senior manager for all the financial and funding initiatives. And then Freddie Harrell, as he said, he will serve as client officer, which means his job is to stay involved, to be the liaison between you guys and our project team to ensure that all your needs are met and the projects are successful. We offer all of the core services that you guys listed in your RFQ. They're listed here. We have become proficient in all of these areas, and I'll say that our proficiency in all these areas, together with our ability to work as a team, is something that's really led us to be successful over the years. We have a lot of experience with on-call contracts. We know what it means to be an on-call consultant. We know that it's really important to act and work as an extension of your staff, to work with your team members, and to work closely with the entire team cohesively. Those are things that we have learned over the years. And these are some of the current contracts that we have. Again, we have a lot of experience that cover all of our service offerings in areas all the way, or local governments all the way across the state, ranging in size from town of Lake Lure to City of Hendersonville, Asheville, Greensboro, and Raleigh. This is, here we have listed here what we would call our on-call service leaders. And this is essentially a picture of all of the key people that will cover all of our service areas that could be involved in a number of projects over the years if we do this project for you guys. Important to this slide is Keith Pugh. Keith Pugh will serve as the on-call contract manager, and Keith is out of our Asheville office. He's a retired city engineer. He spent 20 years as a city engineer with the city of High Point. Has been with us for a while. Excellent choice in this role. Unfortunately, he had a commitment that he could not get out of today, and it was unavoidable, so he could not be here today. Keith will be the primary point of contact, and he will work closely with Jay Johnston and others to allocate our resources to help service you guys and to make sure your projects are successful. And now what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Gary Warner, and I'll let Gary come up and touch on the importance of placemaking, and we'll do that before we really dive into the meat of the presentation.
Thanks, Cameron. Now we can talk about the fun stuff. As Cameron mentioned, I'm a landscape architect and urban planner with Withers. We do consider ourselves placemakers, and essentially what that means is that placemaking is a multifaceted approach to the design and management of your public spaces. And so whether it's a park outside town hall here or your streetscapes and those kind of things, we get deeply involved in understanding how we need to work in the public realm. We go out to dinner with our friends, we meet on the street for a cup of coffee, our kids play in the street, you know, eventually go into the park. So, and how we get around town is all within the public realm, so we take great pride in understanding how a great public realm works. We truly believe that a great park system and a great public realm can drive economics in your community and start to build a memorable place that people want to come and visit and stay in. So we spend a lot of time understanding how that works and how we can be successful in it. Our planning approach and our design approach for these kind of projects is very community-centered based. We talk to you, we talk to your community residents, we talk to business owners involved to understand what works, what does not work, and how we can make things, how we can improve things along the way. And we have a very detailed collaborative approach that's very, very comprehensive. I have a sample here of a comprehensive town-wide master plan that we did for the town of Elkin. I'll be happy to share with you when we finish here. You can take a look at it. But essentially it looks at everything within the public realm in terms of what they need to do to improve their community, and it breaks it down to even to a point of looking at implementation tables. Into what are you going to do in the next 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to keep things moving? Because we hate to do these kind of plans and have them sit on the table and not get done. So we look at implementation strategies and understand how these things are going to work. But our process is very inclusive, it's very collaborative. Our engineers and our Raleigh office and Asheville office, they sit with planners, they sit with funding guys and gals, They sit with landscape architects. We're in a very open collaborative effort. We treat our clients the same way, so we'll be working with you in a very collaborative process, understanding what that means. Everything from transportation all the way down to park systems to the sanitary sewer systems and utilities and those kind of things. We take that big collaborative approach. Fortunately, all the pretty stuff is above ground. These guys do amazing work, but when people come to visit, the only time they get excited, nothing against you guys as engineers, the only time that people get excited about a sanitary sewer system is when you turn the knob and nothing works. Or the water system, you turn the knob and nothing works. They get excited. But fortunately for me, as a planner and landscape architect, the things that I get to work on, people get excited about. They get to come and sit on the town green and experience activities and festivals and those kind of things. A lot of times these kind of projects really are public investments, and they become part of your economic drivers that can help drive your community. We totally understand how a good public realm can drive economic redevelopment. And so we take a look at that in terms of understanding what that takes. This is an before and after image of North Wilkesboro that we worked with to understand what the streetscape needed to help the community reinvest in itself, and have the business owners and buildings owners reinvest in themselves too. A lot of building owners, we have realized over the years that they will sit on their property until the community comes in, the town comes in and does an investment on the streetscape or the utility system. And all of a sudden they start to realize that there is a investment by this town. They have some skin in the game. Therefore, I can really start to invest in my building as well. This starts to drive the economic base. It starts to drive taxes, and incentives and those kind of things. So we really do understand how these things can lead to economic redevelopment. So the challenge in a community like this is, how do we create something that people just can't stay away from? How do we bring people back year after year? How do we get people to move here or retire here if they're so desired, if that's the wish? But the idea is that we create something that people cannot stay away from. How do we create those moments in your public realm, whether in the town square, management activities that bring people together and connect with each other and connect to the community as well? So we understand how to work from on a large scale to create a mixed-use development or something. This is a project in West Shore, which is right outside of downtown Tampa, and they wanted to create a town center. So we understood what it takes to create a truly mixed-use development that can be self-sufficient and bring people in, provide residential opportunities, provide business opportunities, provide offices, work with the marina so we can have that additional tourism factor worked in there. So we can work at that large scale, and we also work at a smaller scale in terms of parcel by parcel. This is a little underdeveloped, underutilized parcel in Elkin that we recently worked on. And they wanted a gateway to their town. And there's a couple different definitions for a gateway. I mean, for a gateway to Chimney Rock State Park, you can essentially cross through the gate. You cross past the columns there, and you actually cross into the park. For a community like Elkin, they wanted a gateway that was a series of movements. So as you came into town from the north side, you came through a series of districts that essentially was their gateway. And we can easily see something like that happening here. And so this turns into a good mixed-use development with some, apartments with residential over retail, better efficient use of that commercial parcel, their tax base increases and those kind of things. And we did this again on another part of town. They wanted a pedestrian-friendly town center. And this is not exactly pedestrian-friendly, but when we start to model this a little bit, start looking at how things get designed and repositioned, we start to create a safer pedestrian environment. We start to create additional economic opportunities with business locations and offices above retail and those kind of fun things. For those of us who have kids have kids or grandkids, a lot of times we are posting on Facebook. My wife is constantly posting on Facebook about our kids. And so part of placemaking is, how do you create those moments that are memorable for you, that you share with your family and your friends, and it brings people to your community because they want to participate in the same thing. If you follow the hospitality and tourism industry, this is often referred to as the Instagram effect, and whether that's positive or negative, but you see these kind of images posted in one of our parks that we did, that get shared and people want to come and visit. But how do you create those moments that become special? This is a project I worked on as a young landscape architect 20-some years ago, Lake Eola in downtown Orlando. This could very easily be Lake Lure. There's no reason why it couldn't. But 15 years later, I'm walking by and I happen to capture this moment. So this Lake Eola has been special for this young man because he brought his soon-to-be bride to Lake Eola. The proposal happened. Now Lake Eola is forever etched in her memory as a sacred place, because we truly believe as placemakers that when you create that memory of a place, that place becomes sacred. So how do we do this for your community? How do we work on the town center? How do we look at, activating these kind of spaces? Because it's really about creating those moments and those memories that keep Lake Lure in the forefront of people's minds as a place to visit, as a place to reside, and a place to potentially open a business, possibly, So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Jay and let Jay chat about engineering stuff.
We consulted engineers and then said that I'm gonna talk to you about engineering stuff, so I'll try to pick it up and make it better. Thanks for having us. I know you're not familiar with all of our faces, but you're not unfamiliar. You're not unfamiliar with Withers Ravenel. We actually have a long-standing relationship with you by way of Denny Martin. And Denny Martin's been working with you for several years, and it's led to this place where we're working on this financial analysis and capital improvement plan project with Seth. I'm working with you on a water system project that will join the Lake Lure system with the Firefly Cove system and provide redundancy there and a more robust water system overall. And also, we have a relationship with the wastewater project by way of Seth, who has been a reviewer and a funder on that project all along. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So this part of the presentation begins to look at what we're calling the acute and immediate needs, the wastewater needs, and others, some of which you've identified in your document, the pre-decisional draft. Obviously, a major thing is to repair the dam, the bridge, the power plant. You're already engaged with Schnabel on that. We're actually a part of the Schnabel team and are closely coordinating and communicating with them as the project moves forward. We need to cease the notices of violation and renovate the wastewater treatment plant. We need to reduce inflow and infiltration in the subaqueous system. And we need to plan for the Chimney Rock State Park egress. This is part of placemaking and is part of economic development. So how do we get there? We need a deliberate and systematic approach. And I'm going to point out 3 areas that I think are key. The first is regulatory relationship building and strengthening. We've got to hit the NOVs straight on, the notices of violation. We need to negotiate an SOC, a special order by consent. That will give the town some relief and a schedule and room to proceed. The next thing to do is to secure funding. We already know that a step 1 is to revise the engineering report and environmental information document, the EREID. That's the first step. It was even mentioned in the RFQ. And doing that's going to help to secure the existing funding offer that you have. And the next thing to do is to develop a strategy for more funding for more project work. And the third leg is develop a strong technical approach. The NOVs and the availability of funding really drives a focus toward the wastewater treatment plant, probably the first thing to do. And the other thing to do is to focus on the subaqueous collection system. That may come second, or it may run concurrently. How do we help you get here? These are 6 people that were highlighted in the statement of qualifications that we submitted. Some of us are here today. This is almost 200 years of cumulative experience in engineering, design, evaluation, regulatory relations, SOC development, and dealing with NOVs. So, the first thing, develop a better relationship with the regulatory agencies. How do we do that? Well, we do it with experience and relationships. We do it with people and communication. The previous slide with the faces, all of those people have experience day in and day out in our regular course of business dealing with the regulators and creating good, positive relationships. There was a statement in the pre-decisional draft under the heading Solution that said Lake Lure seeks to establish symbiotic relationships with federal and state agencies. So you're already all over it. You know this has to be done. It's the first step. Michael Wicker, who will speak to you soon, will be a key piece in establishing better relationships and negotiating an SOC. For 17 years, he worked for the state. He's a former SRF program engineer and a former DEQ regional supervisor. Long history in working in SOCs and working with clients under NOVs. And he's worked on more than 100 wastewater treatment plant projects in North Carolina. I have spent my whole career in municipal infrastructure engineering. I'm a former city engineer. I've worked on SRF projects renovating water plants and wastewater plants that were under NOV and needed SOC development. My whole career has given me tons of experience in water and wastewater systems. The next thing is securing funding. Seth Robertson will talk to you more about that. How do we do that? He's going to talk to you in detail, but the same thing. We do that with experience and relationship, and we do it together, us with you. The third thing is developing a strong technical approach, starting with the wastewater treatment plant, evaluation and design, moving into subaqueous collection system, evaluation and design, maximizing the use of existing funding. And how do we do that? Here's how. I'm going to hand it over to Michael Wicker now, and he's going to talk to you about wastewater treatment thoughts.
Thank you, Jay. So, as Jay's already mentioned some, we're fully aware that your wastewater treatment plant is non-compliant with your discharge permit, and that you've received violations over the years for several of your parameters. So, one of our initial goals is to work with the state in negotiation of the plan of action and the schedule under your special, and have a special order of consent so that you can stop enforcement action while you're resolving your problem. We'll be focused on that as part of the alternatives in looking at things. And so, how do we do that? We know that you have critical timelines, both from the standpoint of the regulatory agencies as well as your funding agency. And so we need to get out and hit the ground running. The one initial step in response to your request for qualifications is that we'll look at all the available data, the plans, specifications, operation and maintenance manuals, the previous studies, previous reports, and dive into them, evaluate them, give you that opinion that you wanted on the last engineering report in the next 3 weeks. We'll digest that. In addition to that step, during that time, we need to inspect the wastewater plant ourselves, interview your staff and the folks that are involved with the wastewater plant to get their input, because they know how it runs. We came from the outside, come in and know that. And we need that input back into not only evaluating the problem, but also seeking the solutions. one thing that, as I was reviewing coming into today, I think would be advantageous is to go ahead and get sampling started on the influent, maybe in ways that it hasn't been sampled to date. Looking more at the water chemistry and the pollutant loadings on the front end to see how we can affect it on the back end. And not just at the pipe coming into the wastewater plant, but at selected areas out in the collection system before it's under the influence of the lake water, because we know that's a huge influence to it. But at some point, if we can remove that lake water, we need to know what's going to happen then with the regular waste. Okay? So we want to get that started. As I said, finish up the technical memo. We have the meeting scheduled on January 29th with water infrastructure and water resources, and attend that meeting. And following that meeting, that's when we would begin to get into revising the engineering report that you currently have, if it's deemed necessary after that process. And, you know, I think we've all assumed that that is an item that is necessary. So this is our typical approach to design, and these steps right here. So first, before we begin anything, we meet with the client. It would be with the town, the UAB, the town staff, the operations staff of the wastewater plant, and just set out, okay, what is the schedule that we need to follow? What are the project deliverables, and at what points? You know, what are the goals of this project? How are we going to communicate this? Who's in chains of command for communication when we need certain specific things? So we do that up front. Then we follow a 30%, 60%, and 90% submittals processes to the town for the various deliverables that you have during those type thresholds. Those would be submitted to the town for review, and follow-up meeting pretty soon after that with the town to assess it before we go to the next step, so that we don't spend time later going backwards because we weren't all on the same page. So to keep the schedule accelerated, that's what we would do. And we have this for leave behind if that print's a little small. So that takes us into design and to the point where we would have plans, specification, contract documents ready to go to construction. So in evaluating this, the next few slides are just going to look at alternatives that we would look at. Some are specific to you, some are just the generic ways we approach wastewater plant projects. So most municipalities approach wastewater treatment in a biological sense, meaning that, and your original plant started off that way, as I'm sure you know. So in a biological plant, we create an environment that allows the biomass that we keep in the plant to consume the wastewater coming down the pipe. They see it as food. We do that with proper amounts of oxygen, maintaining a proper temperature, proper pH in the water. And in that process, then we can create an effluent that's clear and clean and can be discharged. We keep that biomass in the plant healthy, and over time we take some of it out and waste it as sludge, which is probably the term you may have heard, and we have to manage that sludge and getting rid of it in an environmentally friendly way. So that's what we do in a biological plant. Yours is not conducive to that right now because of the low strength of the wastewater coming in under the lake influence, as well as the low temperature. So the bugs just don't stay happy enough in there to eat the wastewater. But over time, if we can reduce the amount of water coming in, or as possibly you've got economic growth here and residential growth or commercial growth and more strength of waste coming in, a biological system may come more into play for this in the solution. These are just examples of a couple of plants I was involved with at these towns, And right now, we're designing a plant for Mount Olive. That town is under a special order by consent as well for noncompliance. And we're doing upgrades on that plant to get them back into compliance. And that's a biological plant. Another way you approach wastewater treatment, similar to what you're attempting now, is physical chemical means. And that's usually more of an industrial plant or water plant type approach, where you add chemicals to alter pollutant parameters such as ammonia or iron to get them in a form that you can add air to it and strip it out to the atmosphere, or they become solids that settle more easily or can be filtered more easily, and again, produce that clear, clean effluent to the river. So you're doing some of that now, and because of that low-strength wastewater, probably we'd have to continue that in-day process in some fashion. This here is a plant that we're involved with, where there was a brownfields evaluation and treatment plant evaluation. We've worked on another one where we took an old abandoned industrial plant and looked at it to treat leachate from coal ash, which is a big issue right now. And we're currently finishing the design on a water plant where we're taking iron out and using ultrafiltration before we send it to the potable water system for the town. Now, in your case, we could likely end up with something a little more innovative than the separate technologies, but more of a hybrid, utilizing both physical, chemical, as well as biological treatment, with the ability for it to tend to be more biological later, if we have improvements in reducing flow, or like I said, if you had higher strength waste coming in just due to development. So these innovative technologies in a smaller footprint tend to be able to really enhance the aeration, the biological removal, the settling, and the filtration and disinfection, where they really compact it in, apply these new technologies to it. Now, they may be a little more expensive and a little harder to run, or more attention to it, but that's taken into account as we do the evaluation. These were some on other projects that we've done there that I've shown. And this alternative is not a total solution, but it might be a supplement to enhance what we come up with, meaning that in decentralized treatment, you go more to the source of the waste than pulling it all together and treating it at the end of the waste. So in your case, it potentially could be, like we've done in some other places, we intercept it before it ever gets to the lake. And we try to reuse it if possible, such as flushing toilets with the same water that it just came from. If you had a large enough place to make it justified, like a school, we've done that. It might mean we go ahead and treat it, but still discharge it, but the nutrients are out of there, so we don't have to treat it down at the wastewater plant. So we've done this recently for Cummins diesel engine manufacturing plant, where they reuse their sanitary waste and cooling water. We did the same thing for General Electric down in Wilmington, where we took the sanitary waste from the employees, cleaned it up enough to use it in the cooling water for the cooling towers. And they don't have a discharge now, or they have a minor discharge to the stream or to the city. Again, Community College in Pittsburgh does that, irrigates the schoolyard as well as reuses it through the toilets. So I don't know that there'd be opportunities for that, but we certainly want to look to see if there was places to scalp it out ahead of time. So those are just the type approaches we take to the wastewater treatment to see what fits, because every place is different. And again, it might be multiple technologies. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jay, because he's going to try to address more of the collection system.
All right. Thank you, Michael. All right, the subaqueous collection and conveyance system. It makes lake lure unique in the state of North Carolina. There's not another one, and there's hardly any in the nation. Not only that, but the collection system's 90 years old, and the condition is unknown because of the limited access into it. Very little inspection has been done inside the pipes. So how do we begin to think about that? How do we begin to solve this problem? Well, there's a little bit of data that's very interesting. Lowering the lake as it is now lowers the flow at the wastewater treatment plant. You could say as much as 56%, but more data evaluation is needed. Clearly, as David Arrowwood has told me and can contest, the flow to the wastewater plant goes down a lot when the water level is down. This picture, this is one of your manholes near Lake House Restaurant. I took this last week. This picture tells a lot of the story. Here you can see the whole manhole is out of the water. And also, the service lateral that's coming to it is out of the water. I'm not sure it ever was underwater, but I think a lot of services are underwater when the lake is full. Also, the 8-inch line that leads out into the trunk main in the lake is exposed for 15 feet, maybe 30 feet, depending on which manhole. And the flow to the plant goes down. That's already telling us a lot of story. It's telling us a story about the evaluation potential that can be taken advantage of, and it's telling us a story about some rehabilitation and replacement potential that can be taken advantage of. You've already looked at a low pressure system and deemed it not feasible. And you know that you need cost-effective alternatives. And cost-effective alternatives can be scoped, but it requires a better understanding of the system condition. And getting a better understanding of system condition requires evaluation, and there are a lot of options to apply to evaluate the system. Smoke testing, that's what you see in the picture right there. With the lake level down, smoke testing could tell us a lot. CCTV stands for closed circuit TV. That's a robotic camera in the pipes. Digital scanning techniques, these are both things that can get you information from inside the pipe to tell you about condition. With all those manholes, we feel like there's a lot of evaluation potential. If we want to see into the main trunk line, there's probably a need for manholes being installed in the lake, and there are techniques to do that, and companies that do that. That would bring metering back into play. Metering helps you to break up the whole system into subbasins and to compare those subbasins against each other based on the severity of inflow and infiltration. And then you can attack the problem in the most severe basins and optimize the use of available monies. And there are monies, grant monies available to do this type of work. AIA stands for Asset Inventory and Assessment, $150,000 grants from the state of North Carolina. Withers Ravenel has gotten about 15 of these for our clients so far, and the program is still active. Once you know the condition of the system, you can start to scope repairs and or replacement. Now, chances are really strong in this collection system it will be a combination of both, but that is the same for any system, whether it's in the lake or not. You're going to apply repair techniques and replacement techniques. One of the first things you do is manhole rehabilitation. You've done some of that. It may have given you some improvement. I've not seen any data on that, but data on that is actually hard to have. Certainly, a new look at that to see if any more of that kind of work needs to be done would just take place in the normal course of evaluation. Joint wrapping, you've done a lot of that, and you got some improvement from that. So we know it's a technique that's viable. CIPP lining, that stands for cured in place pipe. And that is a lining mechanism where you insert a flexible liner blow it up, and the epoxy in the liner cures and becomes a new piece of pipe. So those 8-inch laterals that run out into the lake, you could rehab those from the manhole, turn a jointed pipe into a solid pipe without joints, while also extending the lifetime of that 8-inch lateral. HDPE replacement, HDPE is high-density polyethylene. You fuse this type of pipe together, it too is jointless. The pipe at the fusion point is stronger than the rest of the pipe. You can fuse together thousands of feet of it. There have been projects where you fuse it together, floating, then you submerge it into place where you want it. You hook it back into the system parallel to what you had, and you replace what you had. Lake Oswego is an example that Shannon Baldwin discovered, and that's what they did there. I think this project allows us to focus a lot of trenchless technologies, which I think would be cost effective here, and cost effectiveness is highly needed. What we saw from the picture of the manhole tells us that there's a lot of potential to do work during those periods that you have the lake down. And being able to do it with the lake down also would be more cost effective than having to do it underwater. And obviously we would want to coordinate with the work that Schnabel proposes at the dam, because they're already talking about a new throughway of sewer trunk through the dam. We mentioned trenchless technologies. I want to show you these two faces, Robbie Bald and Kevin Eason. They're on our team. These guys bring a ton of trenchless expertise to the table. Between the two of them, they have about 185 miles of trenchless rehab of sewer lines. That's almost 1 million feet. They're also city engineer guys. These guys bring water and wastewater expertise, negotiation with the state expertise. We really do have a fantastic team. We also have a construction services unit in the company. These guys help us with our constructability reviews of our plans, and then carry projects through to commissioning and deliverable to the customer. We have a geomatics unit. Geomatics is the new word for surveying. It takes into account all of the technological advances in surveying electronics and techniques over the last 20 years or so. And importantly, I think here we have the capability to do survey grade work with drones. We have the capability to do sonar work with our bathymetric unit so we can map the lake bottom. And we also employ a laser scanner that an application here would be to set it up at the wastewater treatment plant, scan it all in, and then you have the whole plant in precision on your desktop to work with in AutoCAD. And our environmental services unit helps us with all of our permitting. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about project management. Project management really is about reaching the goal efficiently. We could talk about the principles of project management, but I would guess everyone here has been exposed to the principles of project management one way or another. We do have internal practices that we abide by. But more importantly, we also understand that every client is unique and every project is unique. So project management really needs to be tailored to those things. And how we do that really is through solid communication. You're a member of the team. We can't achieve a project, we can't achieve the goals, we can't conduct good project management without a clear understanding that the client is a part of the team. Obviously, a main principle in project management is to deliver a project on time, on budget, and for it to be quality. So here are some bullets. We can talk in as much more detail as you like, but here are some main concepts that we apply to get there. We have a lot of reviews. one of Michael's slides, the 30, 60, 90 slide, really implies reviewing as you go. It also implies QA/QC. We have standard practices for QA/QC. The first thing we do on any project is to develop the scope and the budget and the schedule. We call that the work plan. It's documented in a specific place in our file system. Everybody knows it. It's required to be done, and there's frequent check-ins. And the metrics we use to stay on track, some of them, spreadsheets. What engineer doesn't love a good spreadsheet? We have a lot of them that were built for project management, and we use them. Our accounting software gives all of the project managers and engineers access. We're required to track our projects. We're required to stay on time and on budget. I mentioned frequent check-ins. We are people with attention to detail. We document. Also, when we go to construction, our construction services unit, which helps us with the construction admin and does the construction observation, is a very professional work unit that will get it done. We, project managers and engineers, stay with the project all the way through completion. It isn't just handed off to construction services. With the funded nature of this project, there's another layer of project management that that the funding agency will implement that really helps to keep a project on track. Lots of meetings, lots of updates. We believe in keeping you in the loop. If you're not in the loop, the next thing you know, you're calling us worried about not being in the loop, and that probably means something got missed, and we don't like to do that. I don't think we do that at all. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Seth Robertson, and for a brief introduction, you guys, some of you guys are starting to learn about Seth through his work with the financial project and the CIP. He's a former state revolving fund section chief. He's a former DEQ wastewater supervisor, former co-chair of the National State EP SRF. I always stumble on that one. The State EPA SRF work group. I think you're beginning to understand he's an expert in infrastructure funding. And I've said it once, I'll say it again. Seth has been involved in this wastewater project from the beginning, from his chair at Division of Water Infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to him.
Thanks, Jay. So we've heard a lot of ideas and some possible technical solutions to wastewater issues, collection system issues, big ideas from Gary about things to do from economic development and parks and those type of things. At the end of the day, no matter how good those technical solutions are, they don't matter if we can't pay them. Now, we're doing the first step right now. So right now we're working with Shannon and Sam and the department heads and the financial analysis and CIP to catalog what the needs are for Lake Lure. Short-term needs over the next 3 to 5 years, long-term needs the next 5 to 10 plus years. I think we had a really good discussion as part of the council work group last month that got a lot out on the page that needs to be done and we know is expected. I think the biggest takeaway from that is we can't afford to do everything right now that's on that list. And it's a big list, and we know that there's a lot there. So there's a couple things we have to do in order to try to accomplish everything that needs to be done short-term and long-term. One is we need to have a good plan. That's what the capital improvement planning process is. We take those needs and we come up with a reasonable time period to do them in that still meets your needs, the state's needs, keeps you in compliance, and then we have to get funding to help supplement to make things more affordable. No one's better than Withers Ravenel at utilizing funding sources in North Carolina. And that's across the gamut, everything. This is just a number of the places that we've used, from tiny grants to huge loans. from the SRF program, which is the State Revolving Fund Program, a federal program that we're using for wastewater now. USDA, used to be called Farmers Home sometimes, huge loan and grant program, to economic development grants, parks and recreation grants. And we know how to work with all of these people and utilize and receive as much of this money as possible, and then how to administer it once you actually have it to make it successful. Something that's unique about Withers, and I can say this both from my time with the state, now that I'm here, is we have a team of people that are dedicated, that this is what we do all day, every day, is working with these funding programs, securing funding, working with people to make sure we understand the needs, and then making the projects happen at the end of the day. So we've been successful, over $600 million worth of public funding across the gamut of what we do in North Carolina, and almost $300 million in SRF. So we're definitely not new to the SRF game as a company, and obviously from my background, I'm not new to the SRF game. Sometimes for these projects, it's not just one source of funding. We're trying to leverage as many sources of funding as we can to make every project as affordable as possible. Sometimes it's cobbling together a bunch of little grants to help complement a larger loan. But this is what we do, and we understand how to scope projects, how to put things together, how to put applications together to make that happen. And that's across, once again, everything: recreation, transportation, general infrastructure. So just like we have a methodical approach to doing the engineering, to how we're going to look at projects, how we're going to design things, we have a methodical approach of how we're going to go about making funding happen and putting it in place and executing. The first thing we're going to do, and I'll kind of use the dam project as an example, is we're going to look at the project and see what can be done with the scope to make it fit funding programs the best that we can. A lot of times, minor changes in the way you scope a project, what you do, have substantial impacts on the quality and the quantity of funding that you can get. Little changes determine who can fund your project and who will not anymore. Sometimes it's semantics, but the devil's in the details sometimes. So it's better to scope the project early with the understanding of what you're going to be able to use. Once we've done that, we're going to go out and we're looking at funding options and the likelihood of success for each of those. Looking at the dam project, we can look at it face value. USDA community facilities money looks like a really good fit for that project. They can do large projects. It's loan money, it's grant money. You definitely qualify. The dam's going to qualify. But it doesn't mean we don't go look at other alternatives out there. FEMA's got some money that potentially can go into a project like this. There's a lot of disaster recovery, but also disaster resiliency money that potentially can be pulled into a project like this, depending on how you present it and scope it at the end of the day. So we're going to look at all those options and see what's feasible, and also what's going to work for you both from a financial standpoint and a schedule standpoint. Some of the funding sources have long schedules that may not fit for your needs, so we got to make sure we're not tying you into something that's not going to work anymore. And it's also going to make sense financially. We're going to put it in that financial model. We're going to use the financial model to look at your different engineering alternatives and make sure you truly understand the costs of those different alternatives. There's construction costs, there's operation costs, there's the debt service costs. There's a lot to go into that that's not just a number for doing construction. And we're going to make sure you understand those, and we're picking what is the smartest solution. We're going to develop an application submittal plan, making sure we understand when everything's due. We're working on everything early. We're working with you to get the information and making sure we hit all those deadlines to maximize getting that funding. And then we're going to do all the administration once it comes in. Depending on these sources, and I know you're familiar with this, federal money especially, there's lots of conditions, there's lots of requirements. The good thing is we don't expect you to be experts in that. That's our job, and we'll help lead you through that process and hold your hand to make sure all those are met and everything is covered. The difference in what we can do and what a lot of people can do is, especially when we're brought in as part of the engineering, as part of on-call, it's not just project by project. We can look at the big picture. The effect on the town is not this project. The effect on the town is this project and this project and this project, and it's all cumulative. So we can help look at it from the big picture, and we can seamlessly integrate the engineering with the funding work and doing the financial analysis at the same time to make sure that it's all meshed together and we're not getting ahead in one place and another, and that it all makes sense at the end of the day. So let's talk about the SRF project for a moment. It's kind of the elephant in the room. It's a big project. It's a big need. I don't think anybody's happy with where we're at today, given that I think I wrote this letter of intent to fund probably back in 2016. And, you know, we're not where we would like to have been. We would have liked to have been under construction at this point, well under construction and working towards a solution. And that's not where we are. The good news is I truly believe the state understands that, and they're willing to give a do-over and say, you've got one good last chance to make this work. And it's good money. This is a 0% interest loan for 20 to 30 years. And that's part of what we're going to talk about here too. The first thing we have to do, and I know we've got a meeting scheduled towards the end of this month, and that's probably what we're going to use for this, is we've got to have a kickoff meeting, and we got to establish a partnership with the regulatory group and the funding group. And we got to get everybody on the same page. We got to get their buy-in on what we're doing to solve this problem so that they have confidence that the right thing's being done, and we're going to have a project at the end of the day that meets everybody's needs. It's going to have to be completely done differently than probably what we've done to date in the way we communicate, the way we share information, the transparency we have. And it can't be just us being responsive to them. That's a key part, but I think we need to lead that communication. Okay, we need to take the reins and drive that, be proactive in communicating with them before they're coming to us. And we're going to establish that with that kickoff meeting and get that started. It's also the opportunity for us to negotiate schedule and some other things. And we'll talk about the likely schedule in a second, but there's some issues there and we need to negotiate it sooner rather than later. They're going to be more flexible up front than they will be the further we get into the project. We got to look at the engineering alternatives. We talked about looking at the engineering report. Right now, we have an engineering report with a number of not feasible alternatives at the end of the day. So we got to come up with some things that are actually feasible from a technical standpoint and from a cost standpoint that meets the needs. And we have to identify those needs clearly. What has to be done right now to bring everything back into compliance? What's necessary right now? What's things we would like to do and things we can potentially defer somewhat to the future as a longer term type plan? When we look at the engineering report, one of the key things we need to do is try to get that 30-year term. So when I approved the 30-year term for this originally, this was the first, and as far as I still know, the only project in North Carolina that had ever received a 30-year term for SRF. That was the Green Line project that was going to send the flow to Spindale. There's a lot of things that kind of go into that. It has to do with how long the infrastructure is going to last, how well it's going to serve the town, the impact to the town of a 20-year versus a 30-year loan. All that goes into that. So this is the first one that ever got that. Unfortunately, when the alternative changed and that went off the table and it went to a low-pressure sewer system and a package plant, the 30 years came off the table. Doesn't mean it's gone, but it's not there right now. So we need to try, if at all possible, for this initial solution to keep it within the $12.5 million that you have. I mean, we don't want this thing ballooning. We need to keep it within where we're at, because I know that's what you've been planning for. And ideally, we need to come up with something to get the buy-in from the state and local government commission to keep it at the 30-year term, because it's going to have a substantial impact on rates. And we need to do that up front. When we make that alternative selection, it needs to be based both on the technical and the financial feasibility. And then, like I said, we need to drive communication. We need to go ahead and set up regular meetings day one, probably quarterly at the least with the state, with us, both DEQ and DWR and DWI. They're not always on the same page, so we need to pull them in the room to make sure they're in the room so that they understand what's going on both sides from funding and regulatory, and we're going to drive that process and lead that communication effort, and it coming from us and not us just responding to them. We need to demonstrate there's a plan, and more importantly, we got to demonstrate that plan with action. We got to follow up on everything we commit to. If we have an SOC, if we have deadlines, we have to meet those deadlines. Like I said, I think we have a great opportunity here to continue to use the funding we have in hand, but we don't have the opportunity for anything to go sideways at this point and risk losing that funding. It's just worth too much to the town. And then there's no reason not to look at additional grant opportunities. We have money, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't stop looking at potential other funding sources while we go through this to see if we can offset some of that loan. And that doesn't eliminate the idea of even looking at legislative contacts. There's not a ton of grant money in the state, and one of the best sources over the last several years has been working through the legislature to get direct appropriations, and that's something we should certainly look at as a possibility, and we have some time to work with that. And that's all things I think that we have to be very aggressive on to make sure this project moves forward and stays in line. Let's talk about the schedule. So this is likely the schedule when the state shows up at the end of this month. This is the schedule I expect they're going to give you and expect to meet as a maximum schedule. So in talking to them, I think they're basically going to reboot this as if you just got funding and put you on the normal 24-month schedule. So the way it works through the SRF program, the State Revolving Fund, is when you receive funding, they give you a letter of intent to fund, which is where you're at right now essentially, and they put you on a 24-month schedule to get under construction. They're going to assume that getting an engineer under contract starts that schedule. So I built this essentially from February 1, with that being what they say when they show up at the end of January, we're going to start this schedule. There's a couple things we need to be aware of here specifically. June would be the engineering report amendment, and the environmental work needs to be done. I think that's doable, but we also got to make sure that we do the work necessary to have the right solution, because rushing to the right solution and starting down a bad path again is not going to help anybody. So we have to make sure we have the right solution. So if we need more time there, then we need to talk to them about it at the very beginning, and we can potentially shorten some other things to make up for that. They care more about the 24 months at the back end than the interim things in the middle. Okay, that's really their regulatory driver is 24 months. The other issue is if it follows this schedule, then they want it to go into construction essentially February 2022. We need to make sure they understand the potential impact of construction, depending on the scope of the project, on Lake Lure and the lake. We got to make sure they understand that construction we do, if it's going to impact the lake, if it's going to impact lake levels, it's got to be scheduled during off-season to minimize the impact to Lake Lure. And once again, we need to talk to them about that early to make sure we're phasing that in the right way, because the last thing we want is substantial construction if it's going to impact the lake level in the middle of summer. So we need to think about that for contracts, and we need to think about that with the state. And if we do it early, I don't think it'll be an issue, but we need to get on top of it and make sure they understand how important that is to the town. All right, that was a lot. I'm going to turn it back over to Cameron.
Okay, we're in the home stretch now, guys. All right, so why Withers Ravenel, and why this team? Okay, we've explained to you that we have the capacity to successfully complete all of your projects on schedule and within budget. Our local Asheville office is 45 minutes away, which means we can be most responsive. We have the relationships with the state agencies. We've explained that through Michael Wicker and Seth Robertson, along with Freddie Harrell, you'll hear from in a minute, can help you improve your relationships with the state agencies. We have the breadth of services to handle all of the categories that you listed in your RFQ. And our team of experts can not only understand, but they can solve your unique challenges using both traditional and innovative methods. And probably, I won't say probably, most important is funding. You heard Seth say that if you don't have the money to pay for a project, it's not viable. And I hope you have understood through this that our qualifications in the funding and finance arena are unmatched. And probably most important of all, there's no one better than Seth Robertson to help you guys navigate the funding and regulatory processes. That will conclude our presentation, but I want to leave you with a slide here. This is a quote from one of our clients. This is Town of Kernersville, who has been a long-time on-call client of ours. And what's important about this is that we know, and we've learned over the years, that A successful project is only a successful project if the client's happy. And this is what Doran has to say about us. And with that, turn this over to you guys for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think our UAV is going to move up to these tables here so they can interact with you a little bit better.
What can expect effect?
Oh, can we put that screen up? Laura, can you put that screen up so we don't decapitate somebody?
Thank you.
Projector.
Can you turn the screen off, Michelle, from there?
Thank you so much. We're going to open it up now just to open questions from our UAB board. No, we have some that are prepared
Yeah, we have.
already.
Yes.
We'll start with those.
Jay, gentlemen, for your presentation, most enjoyable and informative for that, for the group, on that. But you had 4 questions, 4 major questions. I think it's been addressed a lot by your presentation and the information you gave, but I want to go through these and add to or explain further on these specific projects. First one was relative to the subaqueous collection system and physical chemical plant. Please describe your capabilities and explain your approach to resolving our unique situation.
Thank you for the question. And we had seen those questions in the agenda and did try to build this presentation around those specifically. So clearly our approach starts with Michael Wicker and me, and then utilizes the staff that we showed in the SOQ and some of what we showed in this slideshow. But particularly, the approach starts with understanding the history. We've already begun reviewing engineering reports that were available publicly. There's a record online of your NOVs, reports, letters. We've reviewed the W.K. Dixon, right? The W.K. Dixon report, the Brown report. It starts with reviewing to figure out the situation and the history, moves into establishing an approach. And that's what we've been trying to describe. An approach that another word for that is an evaluation, so that we can then make recommendations. We've got tons of expertise in wastewater treatment. Michael's got over 100 plants that he's worked on. We've applied practically every known treatment technology somewhere. You have to match the treatment technology with the water and the situation. And then from a subaqueous collection system problem solving, the 2 guys I showed you, Robbie and Kevin, absolute recognized experts in system evaluation and repair. Robbie has presented his work nationally. He's recognized nationally. I've spent almost the last 20 years of my career in sewer system evaluation. I do know I'm not just a project manager. I don't just manage a team. I know that subject matter. And so I bring to you, myself, and a team of people that know how to systematically evaluate a system, match up recommendations with the data, and scope a project to move forward. Now, this project, the subaqueous collection system, if the town elects to keep it in the lake, and I think it is ultimately your decision that you'll probably use engineers' recommendations to make. If you keep it in the lake, which I think you can, it's going to take good evaluation and good recommendations, and it's gonna take a lot of deep thinking about it. It's a great problem to solve. Engineers love a problem like that. We have talked about it for hours and hours. It intrigues us. Like I said, and I know this because Seth told me, because he's reviewed projects across the whole state for most of his career. There's no other system like yours in North Carolina. And from a lot of research, I've been pounding on this problem for weeks and weeks. There's almost no others in the country like yours. So it's gonna take pulling from this knowledge toolbox, this evaluation ability, the ability to think it through to evaluate it well. Even evaluating the system is gonna take a lot of care because it's 90 years old and some of it's about 80 feet deep. Now, I don't know if I've answered it any better just now than I did in the presentation, but that's what I say about it. And we can say more if you like.
Let me see if I understand. So if I ask where Reynolds and Ravenel was right now, as far as the whole wastewater system, you're at the evaluation stage, no decision on, and that's all right, let's not say it. You're in the evaluation phase of deciding what a process is to solve that problem. That's where you're at right now.
I don't think it would be fair to come into this room and tell you I have it solved. I wouldn't expect you to believe me.
All right, just want to know. Thank you.
Just maybe it was the way I was listening to the presentation, but did I understand you to say that you would work on the sewer plant first and then address the flow issues into the plant?
I said something like that.
Yeah.
I think that the history of NOVs, notices of violation, that they really picked up in about 2000 and have stayed steady on your heels to present. And those are related to violations of your NPDES permit. And you're violating that permit because the wastewater treatment plant is not treating the water sufficiently. So the NOVs drive you to a solution at the plant. And the available funding, as Seth can speak more to, is probably perfectly viably applied to a wastewater treatment plant project. So I think those two things drive you to look there first. It doesn't mean that we have to land there, but I think those are drivers. And the collection system can be evaluated concurrently, or it can be evaluated later as funding allows. I think a funding strategy is gonna help us answer that. Some funding to help in evaluation. Because a deep, deep evaluation of the collection system is going to take time and money.
And I was thinking, we are talk about solving a problem in romance. These folks are in love with us as far as the NOVs go. But one of the things that I'm curious about, or your opinion on, is if we go with the wastewater plant first to eliminate some of those NOVs, then we come back and reduce the flow by 56–60%. Aren't we looking at another issue from a treatment standpoint?
So that, yes, potentially. And Michael was trying to steer the discussion in that way, that these situations need to be evaluated now and proposed upon, because the renovation of the plant could be a hybrid of physical chemical approach, biological approach, and most likely needs to take into account this either gradual or perhaps sudden shift back to biological. If we can eliminate enough I&I from the system and bring the wastewater strength back up to support biological, that plant will need to be a biological plant. And in my opinion, you want it to be. So these things have to be considered during the evaluation stage. I suspect that you'll need a hybrid of physical, chemical, and biological, and an ability to start switching over to biological as your waste strength comes up.
I think ultimately that's where we would like to be. We started there, and it seems to be, we're the only physical chemical municipal plant in the state, to my knowledge.
To my knowledge, too.
Yeah, and, we're like a long range on that one.
Is there a way that we can, with our current treatment plant with upgrades, or treat it with the I&I we have now?
To treat the wastewater to suitable discharge standards with the I&I that you have now?
Yeah.
I think so, but I would like Michael to speak more specifically to that.
Yes, sir. I mean, some of the examples we showed, we're taking poop and running it through cooling towers. We're reflushing toilets with it in schools.
Right, but we don't have much of an outlet for that in Lake
But
Lure.
what I'm saying is, we can put it out the pipe the same quality. That's just a matter of equipment and money. But we got to evaluate, can you afford those treatment technologies? And lots of plants have I&I, not like yours. But we do have to always address the peaks and valleys. You're going to have an issue even if we get the lake water out, because you're a seasonal, you go from, what, 2,200 people to 5,000? Right there, you've just...
We go from 1,200 people to about 15,000.
Okay. So seasonally, you're going to have issues too that we've got to take into account.
Is the
So-
question, can we treat the wastewater to suitable standards with the equipment that is there now? Is that the question? Or can we
I guess that's the
modify?
question.
We need
You
to-
haven't to date. I'll
Okay.
take it. And I might get blunt.
That's
So,
okay, I do.
They're probably there with a hook. And I'm putting my former regional supervisor hat on a bit, okay? Because you're having to deal with that, those folks. Just like Seth can put the funding hats on. At the end of the day, you got to get back in compliance, whether it's lake water going out or we take care of that and it's more traditional wastewater treated and going out. So we've got to size it large enough to handle the flows coming to it, no matter what kind of water it is. I think we'd all agree to that. So you have these fluctuations, so hydraulically it's got to handle it. We can put physical barriers in. There's technologies that do that. That will keep it back and allow clean water to go out. The problem with those is it's a term they call flux rate. So basically, if you got a lot of stuff it's got to catch, and it catches it, then you may have to clean that off real quick to keep things going through. But there's barriers in those innovative technologies that can clean that stuff out, no matter the volume it's in. The problem will be making it handle 1 million gallons instead of handling, 250,000 or 500,000 gallons. So you have to build in those redundancies for when it's lower and when it's higher.
It's
Now,
not a switch, just a flip.
right. We really need to identify the source of that iron. Because right now you're getting a lot of iron carryover that's causing you some issues. It's not really a permit limit, the iron itself.
Iron?
The iron in the effluent, from what I read from the reports, you're oxidizing iron and it's causing some settling problems because it shows up at the end of the plant where the chlorine is. And you've had to move your chlorination back for that reason. At least the engineering report said so. There's some more effective ways to possibly use your current units that we could look at. There's plates you put in settling tanks that slow it down so that it settles better. Right now, from the reports, you've got a lot of problems on what you have settled, handling that and getting it out effectively. No plant runs effectively, physical, chemical, or biological, if you do not handle the residuals correctly and get them away from that plant. Eventually, it's going out. So that's a prime place to put money in repairs, is to take care of your sludge. And there's methods to do that and to dewater it. You might even get a beneficial product out of it. It's usually not profit generating, but at least you can get rid of it easier in some ways. But that's why in my part of the presentation, I did say we need to really look at that water chemistry coming as it is now and how it might be, and see which things we select that'll handle it now. And as you transition to biological, if you get the waters out. And I think all of us in the I&I field will tell you, we can get a lot of water out, but it's hard to get it all. So, we may not get it where if you put this at the end of a subdivision, you'd have the normal textbook strength of a domestic wastewater. There's a lot of places it can get in. So, did I address both of your
Yeah, I guess
questions?
one of the questions, one of the things we're asking is, one, we had 600,000 gallons a day coming in, and we lowered the lake 12 feet. And we know we lost 370,000 gallons. Okay. So in 12 feet of whatever out there in the collection system, there's 370,000 gallons of flow. Right? So on a common sense standpoint, it's not like you walk out and look at 12, never mind the plant, I got the plant part, I'm not talking. But just stand out there today and look at all 65 manholes and all the pipe. And somewhere in that 12 feet of water is 370,000 gallons of flow. Right? And so it seems like that's a fairly rapid thing that should be evaluated before we raise the lake back. Because if there's an obvious hole, we have to fill it. Right? And that's, I think, what we're asking. At least that's certainly what I'm asking. If there's an obvious
I can
hole
take it.
in the infiltration, if you fix that first.
Yeah. Well, and that is why Jay put that slide in the presentation. That's low-hanging fruit to look there.
And smoke testing show that?
Correct, I'd love to.
65 manholes, it shouldn't be that big a deal, I wouldn't think. I'm not in that business.
Smoke testing with the lake down like it is now would show us so much.
Well, what are you doing in the morning? What time do you want to start?
It looks like one of the first things we're gonna tell the state is, we're gonna spend money right now to figure out where the 370,000 gallons is getting in the system. Because we know if we take the lake down 12 feet, we cut out 370,000 gallons. I mean, right now, we can prove it. That part, that's stuff that we don't have to have. We know that happens now blocked. And it looks like we could, it looks like we ought to. I do know more than I'm suggesting, but we ought to find the holes in the pipe in 12 feet. It's only 12 feet, it's not the whole system. It's actually not the deep part. It's a shallow part.
It would seem to me there should be some kind of, I'm not, you guys are the experts, I'm probably running my mouth and should shut up, but it would seem to me like if it's within 20 feet of that pipe, there should be some kind of balloon or something to run down that pipe, blow it up, seal that pipe off, stick the smoke thing to it and turn it on, and we ought to be able to find the hole.
It's likely to be about 1 million small holes, like the size of your.
Well, then we've solved our problem, we know we gotta put liners in.
But smoke testing shows you that.
Yeah,
where they are.
right.
Smoke testing's a visual, it's like an old shoot, this is not what we want to do. That would show a lot of smoke. And, another thing, it'd be a good time right now to evaluate the chemistry of the water. While we're down from the standpoint of what we potentially would have to treat
Yeah.
down the road.
Yes, sir, and that's also why I mentioned, well, before it even touches the lake, are there some concentrated areas where your normal sewer flow reflects normal conditions before it got to the lake? And maybe you've done, some of this. And I would I cautioned Jay even with that slide when he was putting it together, to your point about that big difference. When you have the lake down, does that also coincide though when the population is down? So is all the flow you're accounting for there? But,
You could take statistics and say, if I had so many people, we only got 1,200 people hooked up to the
Mhm.
sewer system. So even if 15,000 people here, they're all put in the sewer system.
right, you can take who's left at this point
And you can
and generate
lump
that,
number of
yeah.
people and say, what's the flow, what's the sewer flow, what are people adding to the sewer system?
Correct.
But what I'm saying is, water from the lake is 370,000 gallons, or roughly some number like that, because there aren't that many more people, there's only 1,200 houses, add that back, so let's say that's 70,000 gallons, there's somewhere, half of that's at least or more is water from the lake.
Yeah, we don't argue with you. I just want to caution that when you do things, you have to look at all the factors. Yeah, there should be, textbook for what it is. There should be about 100 gallons per person, coming in. And you can,
We will,
Yeah.
even if we take the water out, we still, well, some of these folks may have leave.
yeah.
We have the flows from, February when the year, or December and January when the water was up, to make that comparison.
Yeah.
And we had from summer when people were here.
Yeah, so you're correct. That's part of what we need to look at.
That
And
56% that I calculated is from December, when.
No,
When you started drawing the lake down, the flow at the plant right then had been around 500,000 gallons a day. And once we stabilized around this 12 feet level, the plant flow stabilized around 220,000.
right, so you add more people back in, so they can have in the summer like they do.
And a 4-inch clean out will allow about that much water in, if it's got enough head on it, yeah.
Did you hear what David's saying is, he was watching the lake level as it went down and plotting the flow rate through the plant. And so as the lake level was going down, the plant flow rate was also.
You can see it dropping every day that
Yeah.
we brought the lake down. And what you mentioned earlier about the strength of the flow coming in, we had, samples to test the strength when we were around 220 or 30,000 gallons a day. We had one day that the flow was down to 150,000 gallons per day. And I told the plant operator then to get samples then as well and have that sample. So we should have some of that information coming. But
So we
I
can
agree
see
with
the
Jay.
wastewater strength change as well.
Yeah, I agree with Jay. I think we have a lot of little leaks. Cause I've been out on the lake since the lake was down. I spent 8 hours on Saturday out there all day when they were going from manhole to manhole since the lake was down. And did not find any major issues. And we had actually went out on the lake prior to the lake coming down, flipping leaves to try to find manholes, and we found big problems. We didn't see it prior to, and we haven't seen it since the lake's down. So it leads me to believe that we have a lot of very small leaks that are adding up to the roughly 250,000 gallon a day average. The difference is made from where it was when we started the pond, where it is now.
And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not the line still underwater, because you gotta remember, you're reducing the pressure on those lines too. So, and if you got a lot of little leaks, reducing that pressure also is gonna reduce the flow into the major line of the lake. So, but that's why we have to do the investigation. What I'll say from the funding standpoint is, we've got $12.5 million to try to bring you into compliance. Now, that can be sewer work, that could be plant work, it probably is some of both. But I think the number one focus is compliance. What do we have to do to get the plant back into compliance, get you in good graces with the regulatory community, stop getting fines, because none of that's productive. And if we can get in compliance, then we can look at maybe even bigger picture, long-term. We know stuff's old, we know stuff needs to be replaced, but the first thing is figuring out what gets in compliance. It's a combination. If we can get some flow out, that helps, but it also makes the treatment worse. Because if the strength goes up, actually, you're probably gonna have more compliance issues at the plant than you do today. So we still have a lot of plant work to deal with compliance regardless.
You know, now if you go back to biological, it's gonna be a different process.
Right.
I guess that's what worries us, is we're spending money on a plant when the strength is gonna be totally different after we substantially fix the infiltration. And you all said doing one and the other, it looks like you're gonna, I think we'd be going to state, it seems like we'd be going to state with the wrong solution if we didn't figure out both at the same time, because we're fixing one problem when we're gonna eliminate part of that problem when we fix the other problem.
And this segues into a kind of a statement, maybe a question, but we've got 12.5 million, or approved for 12.5 million. If we spent $30,000 per manhole, that could be rehabbing a manhole, replacing the lateral from the manhole down to the water's edge where it is right now. That's 1.9 million. You got 10.5 million left to do something at the plant. That's a biological plant. Sounds like to me.
Could be a biological plant.
That
Could be a
Or it's still
biological
mix.
plant.
I think it'd still be a mix, yeah.
As long as we look at this, we've been on the wrong path.
Yeah.
I've been on this committee 4 years, we've been on the wrong path twice.
Right.
We don't wanna go down the wrong
We were
path.
led down that.
We're trying to run on the wrong path.
That's right, Wayne.
Don't want to belabor.
Yeah, don't-
No, I
No,
think these
these are
are all
good.
fantastic
Yeah,
questions.
we've been having the
Definitely
same
understand.
I mean, we appreciate the evaluation, but we want the
Right.
right answer.
Right, oh, I agree.
Before we spend any money. not
I
after
agree,
we spend
right, and
money.
that's why I said, that deadline of doing the engineering report and figuring out the right alternative is, you know, if it's gonna take 6 months to get the right alternative, I'd rather us tell them it's gonna take 6 months than us try to come up with some alternative in 3. or
Well, you
4 or
understand.
whatever. We gotta get the
We wanna-
right.
we don't wanna take the water
Solve the
down
problem
in the
before
summer,
we do
so.
what we're trying to do.
That's the other.
Folks,
Right.
Tim?
And I'll, if I can, I'll just give you an idea of our thought processes, or mine. So in looking at your reports, and, you know, it's emphasizing this iron, which is not usually a problem in a wastewater plant. So I went and pulled up your water system data from the state, and I don't see any iron treatment for your groundwater. So where's your iron coming from?
Probably from all the small wells everybody has in their house that don't work as well as the deep wells that are provided in city water.
It-
Like
it-
mine.
I mean-
I can tell you, my well's got iron in it.
Okay,
So does mine.
Yeah.
all right.
I've got a system that treats,
You don't have the kind of iron that he's talking about, though. You know, iron in a water system is very noticeable at very minimal concentrations. It's like secondary limit on it in water of, what,
Well, let me say
0.5?
this, I bet all the house wells are fairly shallow. If they're not all hard water, I'm amazed at how that reflects what you're looking at chemically.
Mhm.
But that's probably different than the deep wells the city has.
So when we were looking at it, then my thought was that coming from this pipe, this cast iron pipe? Is it out of your water system distribution?
The water
Where is
you're seeing
it coming
in
from?
the wastewater plant, in my opinion, is not substantially coming from the city water system. Most of it is coming from small wells. That houses, I don't think most of the flow, I don't know, I'm wrong.
we have very minimal people on the city water.
City
Mhm.
water, right. Yeah, so you're not looking at the city, if you're looking at city water, see how the wastewater flow is, you're not looking at the right water, I think.
But does anyone think it's, the lake water has a high iron content, and that's the source?
I don't know.
Now, we have it tested. David, does it, lake water have higher iron content?
No.
I know
So-
all the local, well, all the wells I know of are hard water wells.
So that's just to show you, you know, this is not a usual thing we have to deal with at a plant, a wastewater plant. We do it all the time at water plants. And
It's way out of range, out of the scope of what you would normally expect to see at a wastewater plant. I've never seen more of an iron removal system.
so, and again, so we need to see where that source is in the sampling and to know how to address it better, to make sure that's what if we eliminated the source of it being a problem at the wastewater plant? Do we even have to than worry about that cost at the wastewater plant to put in a,
It'd be a good idea if you
yeah.
can extend the city water system around the house out there.
Okay, we've
Can you find
established,
money for that? That'd be a little-
we established that we've got a unique situation, it's becoming more unique as we talk about it, and I don't want to belabor the point, but we just didn't want to have your comments on
Sure.
where you're going with that. The second question involves revenues. Seth, you did a great job and elaborating on it when you were speaking with, just now, but it's given the enormous cost, how can you help the town, obtain revenues?
And I'm not gonna talk a bunch, cause we did talk about it a lot. And, you know, it's a couple things is using the financial analysis work that we're doing, understanding what the needs are. I mean, what are the revenues, what are the expenses, and what is the gap that we need to do these projects, especially as you plan out the CIP over time, and when you're gonna need the money and what the revenues need to be at the time when you're doing the project, and the impact of the project on your costs. You know, if you're doing a membrane plant, that's gonna be a lot more expensive to operate. Obviously, a low-pressure sewer system is gonna be a lot more expensive to operate, so you gotta understand all that. But, you know, big picture for us, it's understanding the funding programs that are out there, knowing how to use them, knowing what they're looking for, developing projects that fit those, and successfully navigating that process. Because there's definitely good funding sources out there that you can utilize. I mean, you're definitely doing it with SRF. Like I said, you fit for USDA well. There's a number of other sources depending on the types of projects. And it's just building that into the project as soon as possible so that you can start trying to get the funding. So one of the things you tend to get into for large projects, and large is, you know, it depends on what you define as large, is there's limits on what an individual funding source or round can do. So a lot of times, if you can start planning super early so that you can apply 2 or 3 times to 2 or 3 sources to get all the money that you need. But a lot of that's good planning to making sure you have the time to do that. If you've already developed your project and started design, you don't have time to go out there and hunt for money for 12 to 24 months. So you need to start that process super early to get ahead of everything. Because then you also get the different requirements into design and everything else, and you're double spending money and everything else, and you're completely inefficient, so.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Appreciate that.
Seth leads a work unit at Wheelers Ravenel that specializes in, and we're a fairly unique organization that has a unit that specializes in funding pursuits.
Are you with Martin or are you with?
So, yeah, I'll explain this whole thing, because I've learned myself since I started. So the group that I am, what's now called Funding and Asset Management, effectively is what was W.R. Martin McGill. So yes, that's the group that I'm the director of now.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're, all of them are employees of Wheelers
Wheelers
Ravenel.
Ravenel.
Yeah, it's a wholly owned, essentially subsidiary of Wheelers Ravenel and completely in that umbrella. So it took a while, it's been a process, but it's all there now, so.
So one of the questions we've talked about is how do we get, how can you help us develop a plan to get more customers around the lake hooked to the sewer?
Yeah.
That's not a funding issue, that's how do we encourage people to participate? What would you bring to that table?
Okay, so, well, that's a couple of things. It can be a funding issue if you need to try to come up with the funds to hook people up and to do improvements to actually make that work. So it can be an infrastructure issue. What is the issue in getting people to hook on now?
Money,
Money?
Say we don't know.
They don't want to pay for it?
they don't have, well, if they have a functioning system
Right.
now, you know, they don't wanna just, that's my opinion.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things that, as a town, you can do. They're not necessarily super palatable from a political standpoint sometimes, but you have the ability to make people hook up. You have the ability to charge a availability fee even if they don't hook up,
Right.
because it's out in front of their house.
We've explored some of those. We have explored some of
Okay,
those.
so, you know, that is a reasonable route to go down, and that's obviously something that you can look at in the financial analysis and in the model of when you're trying to decide how much money, if you want to do that, how many people will be affected, you know, how much impact does it make? Is it worth going out there and doing it if it doesn't really make that much of a difference? But the biggest deal is people now start to have to pay, you know, $40 a month to not use it, just cause it's there. A lot more people are interested in hooking up if I'm paying for it.
How about in developing, is, from a PR standpoint, in terms of developing cares for people to look up, not only financial, but just selling the project to the community? We have 1,200 connected.
Right.
2,500 around the lake or something. These numbers might be, I think they're close, but, so if we double the number of customers, we have more revenue.
Right. I mean, we've got a fantastic group that does outreach and flyers and, you know, go out and have community events. When you've got stuff going on, have a booth to put out there and talk about what things offer. Mail fly, yeah, we can do all of those type things, and we have done those in a variety of different places to talk about what's going on.
We've
And
got a work unit that works on messaging.
And given your type of community, messaging is going to be important for when we're doing projects too. You know, it's really important to get out there and message before the smoke's coming out of the line in the lake to stop the fire department from getting all the calls about the lake on fire. So, you know, messaging is going to be really important, I think, anyway, both because of the type of work we're doing. Some of it's going to be very visible around the lake and in the lake. And these are not inexpensive projects. And they're gonna have substantial rate or tax impacts potentially long-term. So the better you can message what people are getting for their money and think about that and getting that out and coming up with a real good plan, is a really good thing to do.
Because, I mean, we do have a surety that has enough money to sue you. I mean, there are people who have sued over things that the town, the city has done.
Right.
And I mean, because they had enough money to do it, and sometimes they won, sometimes they lost, but the point is, I think if we don't sell it, and all we do is beat them.
Right.
Beat on them, they're probably got enough money to go get a lawyer and go to court just for the heck of it.
Well, and some of that's like what I was talking about with communicate with the state and being proactive. Tell them what they need to know before they call you and ask what's going on.
You said, you answered the question, you
Yeah.
have resources to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Terrific. Both times. State agency relationships, I think we've pretty well established that you and Dennis have spent some time with the governmental agencies that we're dealing with, and I don't think there's any.
Sir, could I speak? Could I speak?
Yes, sir, absolutely, please do.
Sorry. Speaking of the governmental, excuse me, the governmental agency, I'll talk with you just a minute about personal relationships that we have, or I have, with not so much governmental agencies, but governmental officials, which I might add that at some point I would say that you're gonna need help from all of the people I'm gonna tell you about. As some of you may know, I'm from Cleveland County, joining county. And you may know that the North Carolina Speaker of the House is from Cleveland County. He's a personal friend of mine, has been for years. He and his dad. I have friends. I don't have the governor's office on speed dial, but I can tell you that I do have friends that have him on speed dial. I have close relationships with Congressman Mehta's office, Senator Burr's office. I do have their people on speed dial. And I personally know two of the members of the Board of Transportation. So at some point in time, I'll suggest to you that you're probably gonna need to be in touch with those people on some issues, whatever it is, whether it's with Tim Moore's office about some money. They have what they call special appropriations now that they can essentially write a check for if they like the project or they like you. So there are a number of reasons that you need connections to those people, and I think I can bring that to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Good advice. Information. Project management success. After transition from design to construction, what oversight do you provide and what metrics do you use to stay on time, on budget, and ensure quality work? And I think you've probably spoken to that too. Do you want to elaborate some, anything else to add?
Not really, but I'll reiterate a little bit. We have a work unit of construction inspectors, construction administration people. And when you're in a funded project, there's also a very regimented procedure on construction administration and project tracking. We, in this case, when I say we, I say the utilities engineers at Withers Ravenel. We've been working on funded projects most of our careers. So we're really familiar with the way that the SRF people want the project administered. And that really helps things go quite well. You could have a company that knows how to design and get things into construction and really stumble on the SRF requirements. And we're really good at it because we've been doing it forever. The rest of the management principles, I think I covered pretty well. I'll be glad to talk about it more if there's something you want to know specifically.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that. Any, you guys, folks, got-
Yeah, Wayne, I have a question to start off with. So not only are we doing a great job trying to drain the lake through our collection system, we're also doing a really good job trying to fill in the lake, okay, with sediment. So you've talked about two of your big projects, your town development, town center development, impressive, and the wastewater treatment. What resources do you have in-house, or how would you approach dredging and the issues that we're dealing with the dam, particularly the bridge with the State Department of Transportation, and getting the dam within seismic and flow specifications, modern specifications on the dam? How would you do that? Would you go out and find someone? Do you have organic capabilities?
Well, on the dam, I think you're in great hands with Schnabel. And I, Cameron, would not try to add to that. We at Withers Ravenel do not possess the expertise on that. That's why we team with Schnabel. When that dam project first came up, we looked at coming to the town as the lead engineer on it with Schnabel on our team. But at a closer look, it made a ton more sense for Schnabel to be the lead and we're on their team. They haven't employed any of the services that we provide, but we're still on the team and we still communicate with them. We talked with Mark Landis last week in getting ourselves prepared for this presentation, and he talked to us about the seismic issue, but they're still evaluating it. I believe you're in great hands with Schnabel in that regard. Dredging.
So you would create a partnership with, how would you do that? How would you?
With Schnabel?
Yes.
Well, we have a sub-consulting arrangement with them.
Okay.
So when we submitted to Lake Lure, when Schnabel submitted to Lake Lure, they submitted a statement of qualifications, and somewhere in there, they showed Withers Ravenel as a team member. So we bring things like stormwater engineering, hydraulic engineering, piping and conveyance engineering to the team. And then when they need us, we would enter into a sub-consulting agreement with them, and we've done that any number of times. So it'd be really easy to put that in place.
How about dredging?
Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. And Jay's correct, and this is not the first project that we have partnered with Schnabel on. We've done other dams with those guys. Know Mark Landis personally. He and I were in graduate school together, so I've known him for a long time. So we have a fantastic working relationship. With regards to the dredging, so Sam Ravenel, who was one of the founding partners at Withers Ravenel, obviously, his specialty is in stormwater, and he's also a dam designer. In fact, he was the assistant dam safety engineer for a number of years before he and Tony Withers started the firm back in 1983. So Sam, even though we're now an ESOP and they've sold all their stock, Tony Withers is basically retired. Sam Ravenel didn't want to retire, and so he joined our stormwater group. And he said, love to be in the stormwater group. I'd love to be an engineer again. I'd love to do stormwater. I'd love to do dams. I'd love to deal with dredging, with the reservoirs. I don't want to do invoicing, and I don't want to receive phone calls from clients. He said, I'd like to do engineering, I'd like to mentor the young engineers. So Sam is all into this. We've done some dredging, related evaluations for the city of Greensboro for their lakes. I think we mentioned earlier that we have remote sensing capabilities in our geomatics group. So we have a 6-foot vessel that is remote controlled, and it can do sonar and get soundings up to 250 feet deep. So where we can go across the lake as many times as we want, as tight of a grid as we want, to actually get a bathymetric topography or bathymetric survey to get the topography of the sediment, and then help you with a plan to remove the sediment. So yes, we do that, and in fact, we just got a call, working on a plan now for doing the same thing for Wake County for their flood control dams. Their flood control dams are silting in, so. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, thanks.
I'd add to what Cameron said, that if we run into any issue where we don't feel like we're the best that you can get for that particular issue, we're not gonna hesitate to bring in someone else.
Correct.
We'll never hesitate. We're not gonna stumble around with it and hee-haw around about it, we might say down the line more.
Yeah.
We're gonna get the best people in here that know the
And
job.
we don't have to go looking for them. We've got established relationship with structural engineers, with architects, with any number of other services that we need. We won't have to look for them. We have relationships in place.
Anything else? Anyone else have any more questions?
I have a question for you, Shannon. You mentioned earlier another time that the state was building a new bridge across the dam. Is Schnabel involved in that? Is that part of their scope?
Don, you have a question?
Yes. My question would be, on a scale of 1 to 10, and taking what you know about Lake Warren and all the issues with wastewater and so forth, that's the main thing, but everything, on a scale of 1 to 10, meaning 1, not so much of an issue, but 10 being the worst issue that we have, how would you rate the issues that we have, the problems that we have, on a scale of 1 to 10? So that's the first question. Part 2 of that question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your company and your organization on how you feel you rate as a company of being able to help us address all those needs economically, efficiently, and sustainable for the future.
Well, the second one is 10. The first one, do you mean a scale of 1 to 10 compared to other municipalities? How severe your
Whatever
issue
you-
is?
If you were in our shoes, how would you rate of what you see? And you compare to other companies if you want, or other communities. But I think we're hearing and feel we're not like any other community. For instance, as you know, low population, big major infrastructure problems. So how would you rate all of that on a scale of 1 to 10?
So every town has inflow and infiltration. So in that regard, you're a 1. The severity relative to anyone else is really a 1. You got infiltration in your collection system. Everyone does. Now, like several of us said, there's only one collection system like this in North Carolina, and very few in the nation. So in that regard, we could throw a 10 at that. We could rate that as a 10. However, the tools that we approach the problem with are the same tools that we approach a community that rates as a 1. Smoke testing is a really remarkably simple thing to do. And it would apply in Hendersonville downtown the same as it would apply on a manhole on the edge of this lake. So I don't know how to give you a really straight answer, but that's my answer. Some of your situation is really normal, and some of it is really hard. I think the real answer is that it's gonna take good thinking and planning to formulate the right approach.
Anything else? Well, we certainly thank you for your presentation. It was very informative and we enjoyed it, and thank you very much for coming.
Good, thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys.
I think we'll take a 5-minute break before we start a discussion.